Hi everyone, welcome to my studio. This series is meant to help you learn the business of jewelry. My name is Melanie Kline and I've been very blessed to have spent my life in this field. I've always had a retail store as part of my workshop, and I've learned the ins and outs of production, pricing, and marketing the jewelry that I create at my bench. I'm trying to create a series of videos that will be helpful for you. You'll find them to fall in 4 sections. Section 1 will help you develop your skills as a craftsman. Section 2, the design, construction, production, and pricing of a jewelry line, a jewelry collection. Section 3, marketing your line, identifying the marketplaces to sell it. Section 4, the tricks and trades of selling to close the sale. It's important to know that many amazing metalsmiths through the ages have paved the way for you to achieve success as an artist and a craftsman. They've established an industry that's well respected and have created a marketplace where you can successfully sell your work. We will talk about design, production, pricing, and marketing, but first and foremost, we're going to focus on fine craftsmanship and the mastery of technique because that's the basis of everything. Today you're going to learn the technique of forging. We're going to start by using sterling silver, dead soft, 12 gauge round wire. I'm using my divider and the ring gauge chart to find the length for a size 8.5 ring. There's a link to this ring gauge chart in the description below. After forging the wave into the wire, it will end up being a size 7 ring, even though I've measured for an 8.5. I think you can figure that will be true for any size that you need, so plan to cut a size and a half larger or 4.5 millimeters over the size you would like your finished ring to be. Now, using your dividers, mark the length by scratching a line into the wire. Use your jeweler's saw, set with a saw blade no smaller than 2/0. Cut through the wire almost all the way. Leave a little for bending so you can use it to measure for your second cut. Cut your second wire. Now find the middle of your wire. I like to use my dividers for this because I don't really like to measure with a ruler or do the math. On this project, it's okay to be approximate. It won't matter in the end. Bend a curve into the wire as tight as you can make it with the pliers. Don't use a round nose pliers here because you're bound to make a little dent at the outside of the curve, and that will matter. Now, using a steel plate and your rawhide mallet on the edge of the curve, hammer it as tight as you can make it. Do both wires and make them exactly the same. Now we're going to talk about annealing. Anneal is a term I haven't told you yet. It's a technique to soften metal. When you bend or hammer metal, it develops stress points, and it will crack and break if you continue to work it without annealing it. Think of it like a hot bath, relaxing all those molecules into their new positions. Warm the metal with your torch until it glows a dull red color. Make sure to warm it evenly throughout. Then turn off your torch and let it cool down a couple minutes before quenching it and drying it. Now you've reset the temper and you can continue. The technique of forging is the art of using a hammer to alter the shape and thickness of the metal. We're going to be using a polished hammer so that we don't put marks into the metal that we don't want. It's called a forming hammer. We're going to be hammering on the curve. Now, be sure when you strike the curve that you're holding the hammer at an angle. Don't come straight down on it. That will make the wrong mark. We're making a slope, not a platform. Don't hit it anywhere else. Just stay on the curve and hit the very end. Now hammer out the second one to be the same as the first. We have to anneal again now. If you forget this step, your metal will crack when you unbend it and you hammer it into a circle. So be sure to really understand annealing and do it often. After annealing, you're going to quench it and dry it, and then sand where you hammered it to reveal any marks or mistakes that you need to go back and fix now. Okay, we're going to open the band. We need to make sure we do both rings exactly the same. Take a good look at that curved area that you just hammered. You'll see that the side you hammered on is sloped and the back side is flat from the steel plate or the anvil that you hammered it up against. So hold the wire by the two ends. Make sure that the sloped side is on the right. Spread the legs of the wire apart with the bottom one going left and the top one going right. Now hold the other wire exactly the same and make sure that you spread them with the same technique. The two wires should nestle correctly with the same curves if you've done this right. Okay, moving on, file all the ends flat. You'll find that there's an advantage to moving your metal instead of your file. Pull the metal toward yourself from the top of the file toward the handle. Now, using your forming pliers, the one with the flat jaw and the half round jaw, begin to turn both ends of the wire in a fashion to make the ends meet. It won't be round, don't be looking for round. It's going to be more like triangular when you get there. Continue bending to get the two ends meeting evenly and as flush as you can make them. You're going to solder those ends together and they have to be a straight, tight fit. Now, sand all around the area so it will be clean and free of grease, oils, dirt, lotion, liquids, anything that could and will contaminate your solder. Repeat with the second ring. Now flux the area to be soldered with this yellow flux. Using your solder cutters, Fringe the solder into little strips and then cut little squares against your finger so you don't launch them across your soldering bench. We're using hard solder. I apologize for being off camera here and you can't see me pick up the solder with my soldering pick. I heated a little square with my torch and touched my solder pick to it as I removed the torch away from it. It's a fluid motion that you'll learn in no time. Remember, the solder is attracted to the heat, so you have to heat up your destination before you try to place the ball of solder from your solder pick. It has to be hot enough to receive it. Solder each ring with hard solder. Make sure you move your torch all around the ring to evenly distribute the heat and anneal that curve again. Anneal, anneal, anneal. Okay, quench and dry it. Now we're going to make each ring round. You can put it on your ring mandrel and hammer it down with a rawhide mallet, but never hammer on the curve, just on the band. Keep hammering and stretching until that curve isn't sticking up so high, and your ring reads the correct size on the mandrel. Make sure both rings are the same, and when you're satisfied with the size and the shape, sand the top of each ring at the curve to be sure you don't have any cleanup to do before you solder these rings together. Now you have a decision to make. Should you solder them together with the curves nestled against each other? Or should you spread the curves apart to make room for a stone or a design between them? You have to decide so you know how much room to leave for your plan. Here are a few possibilities. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to just nest them and solder them together. So file or sand the surfaces that are going to touch for soldering. They have to be flat and clean. Here I'm using the hand sander that fits on my flex shaft. To me, it's a must in every workshop. To solder, I'm balancing the rings on my third hand. I'm just balancing it so that they're held up off my soldering block. Apply the flux and heat it up. Now make sure that the rings are touching correctly and ball up a little square. Pick it up with your soldering pick. Heat the rings enough to receive the solder and place it touching both rings. Evenly heat the whole surface. making sure that they're the same temperature, because remember, the solder is attracted to the heat and it will flow to the hottest spot. We want the hottest spot to be where the rings are touching. Quench it and dry it. Now that they're together, if they need it, you can hammer them tighter on your ring mandrel. A quick cleanup with a hand sander for the outside. And a snap-on disc to remove the extra solder you may have at the seam. Be careful. Follow the curve of the metal as you sand. Now pre-finish with radial discs on your flex shaft. I always use yellow. It's 80 grit and I like it for everything. And then move to my big polishing motor for trip and rouge. Remember, for the best control of any tool in your flex shaft, learn to push one thumb against the other thumb and hold tight. It'll give you balance and it'll give you control. Okay, if you are new to polishing, please take a minute and watch my earlier video called The Basic Band Ring. I explained polishing extensively there, and I'm just going to be touching on key things to know here. The main thing to know is that Tripoli is a cutting compound, and it will cut away the scratches that you've left from your radial disc or from any sandpaper or files, and it will leave little teeny scratches of its own. Rouge, which is used on another wheel, is a polishing compound. It doesn't cut. It just removes the little teeny scratches that the trip leaves behind, and that's how you get a mirror finish. But it's really, really important that you remember to never mix them. So you've got to go clean the piece, clean your fingers. Don't use the same gloves, don't use the same ring stick between the two wheels, or you'll carry the cutting compound to the polishing wheel and defeat the whole purpose. Here's a better look at that polished all-purpose forming hammer. You know, you don't need to spend a lot of money for a hammer like this. I think Rio sells it, and they call it a Goldsmith cross-peen domed hammer, and they sell for about $8. Here's the Fordham hand sander I always use. It's easy to change the belts when you need a different grit or one wears out. I really like that there's a different radius on either end. I find them useful for many projects. It has a flexible long side, and it's great for rounded and curved sanding. And the other long side with a support table underneath the belt is good for keeping sanding flat. Here's how you change the belt. So easy. These are the snap-on discs I always use. The red ones are coarse, and the white ones are much finer. They snap onto this square head mandrel. Sometimes I use them with the grit facing up. Other times I put it down so the grit is facing my hand. It totally depends on the best way to see and reach the area that I'm sanding. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I sure hope you learned something new. Go practice!